This is From Both Sides, a spontaneous, free-flowing conversation featuring a dynamic team of women, providing insights into both political and civic events affecting the lives of women throughout Pennsylvania. And now, here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of From Both Sides. We're live here at the Grantville Holiday Inn in Grantville, Pennsylvania, with the Pennsylvania Federation of Democratic Women and the second segment of their 2017 Judicial Forum. Today we're hosting our top three candidates for the Commonwealth Court as determined by the Pennsylvania State Democratic Committee. I'm Michelle Saletto. I am chair of the Federation's Political Action Committee, and I'm also the host of the Public Policy, Public Affairs show From Both Sides. While all of us here are well aware of the outstanding array of endorsed Commonwealth candidates sitting before us, and we thank each of you for your commitment to public service, we'd like to hear from each of you on issues that we've identified as the Federation's Political Action Committee as important to Pennsylvania families. I'd like to now introduce our candidates for Commonwealth Court. The Honorable Ellen Seisler, Judge, Philadelphia County. Welcome, Judge Seisler. The Honorable Joe Cosgrove, Judge on the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania. Welcome. And Todd Egan, Attorney in Lackawanna County. Welcome. And please keep in mind for the May 16th primary, Democratic voters may select two candidates. Representing the Federation today from our Political Action Committee is Diane Gregg, my colleague, and myself. The ground rules for this forum are that all the candidates will be asked the same question, and each question will have a timed response. Since our audience is already rather well-versed in the basics about each candidate, we will dispense with the traditional introductory remarks, but if you wish to weave that kind of information into your answers, that's totally up to you. So let's get started. Diane, first question.
Judge Seisler, would you start? What is the single most important thing for voters to know about the work of your court?
The Commonwealth Court handles all government policy issues. The Commonwealth, and I've learned about this sitting on the bench for 10 years, so any issues related to appeals from a government agency at a local level or directly suing the government or the state suing an individual at a state level, so it handles issues that directly and profoundly impact individuals, but also the entire state. So, for example, the Commonwealth Court would handle a wide array of issues on the environment, on education, on workers' rights, on pension protection, on ensuring that there's no discrimination in the laws, that there's equal access and equal application of the laws. It ensures that our civil rights are protected. It protects families. It protects voters' rights. So very fundamental aspects of this court affect your lives.
Well, I'm sitting on Commonwealth Court. I was appointed by Governor Wolf, and I've been on the court since July. And as a practitioner for 35 years, I knew the business of the court and having appeared before the court and having litigated there, but seeing it from the inside and knowing how at the end of every case, at the end of every brief, at the end of every argument, there's a person. There's a human being. There's someone who is in need, someone who has raised a claim, someone who has an issue that must be treated with respect and with dignity. So workers' compensation, for example, unemployment compensation, these are issues that come before this court, come before our court, that we deal with every day. And those certainly have great importance and great impact on people's lives and on families' lives. But the one thing that I think maybe, especially in this political climate, voting rights, access to the ballot, voter identification. Voter identification was last decided by our court, and the statute was stricken by our court. But that issue has not gone away. And it will certainly be important for us to deal with that in the future and deal with any legislative enactment that comes to pass dealing with those sorts of things. Access to the ballot, voter recounts, those sorts of things are critical to everyday life. And we saw, how much people are interested in electoral politics and how much they are going to take that into consideration. So,
well, let me just say thank you very much for hosting us here today. It's always a pleasure to speak to a group of voters and active voters here in Pennsylvania. So thank you for hosting us here today. I'm Todd Egan. I do a lot of work in front of the Commonwealth Court because my partners and I represent about 35,000 union members all across Pennsylvania. So that work leads us to end up in front of the Commonwealth Court on a lot of issues that affect workers all across Pennsylvania. The issues that the Commonwealth Court face first and foremost are issues dealing with workers' rights, and that's the area that I've practiced over the last 20 years, that I've chosen to practice over the last 20 years. So those issues always come up in front of the Commonwealth Court, and those are issues that I think are first and foremost are the issues that we need to focus on. The second area is that anytime the legislature here in Pennsylvania issues new legislation and there's challenges to that legislation, those issues come up to the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania. Issues like voter ID, issues like fracking. So any time that the legislature here in Pennsylvania takes action, it's ultimately going to be heard by the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania. And if we've seen anything that has happened in the last 3 months, we know that the courts are the backstop, and so it's those issues are important to the Commonwealth Court.
Thank you, Todd. I'm going to start with you with the next question, Todd, if you don't mind. What sets you apart from those Republicans you'll be running against? In other words, why should the women of Pennsylvania vote for you?
Well, I've alluded somewhat to my background, and I think as judicial candidates, because the ethical rules prohibit us from saying how we would rule on a particular case, I think you have to look at a candidate's background to understand what kind of judge they're going to be. And I'm fortunate to have 2 great daughters. My one daughter's a sophomore, my other daughter's in 8th grade, and my wife and I are raising them to be strong and independent women. My wife is the assistant superintendent at a school district just north of Scranton. But I see an attack on women's rights, not only health care rights, but I also see an injustice in that we need to move forward on equal pay for equal work, because not only do I want to see that my daughters have the same choices just like men do in the healthcare arena, I also want to make sure that when they enter the workforce that they're going to receive the same amount of compensation and respect that men do. And that's one area that I'm a little selfish because it's my 2 daughters, but I want to see that all daughters and granddaughters all across Pennsylvania have the same rights.
I think this is one of the most important questions that we face, not just as judicial candidates, certainly not just as any political candidate, but as judges. It's the courts that have made the major decisions on issues of rights, of equal rights, of women's rights, of human rights. And the courts are the backstop right now. We know that more than maybe any time in our country's history. And so it is vital that the court maintain that kind of integrity, that kind of courage, and the kind of strength that it has shown, that the courts have shown certainly recently. I'm on the court and we're doing this kind of work. But women in particular, my wife asked me a few weeks ago to take her back to her hometown, which is Washington, D.C. She was born in Washington, D.C., and she just wanted to go to Washington. She said some friends of hers were going to stop by and she was going to gather with them. Happened to be 1 million of her friends, and we just took a walk around Washington, D.C. It was lovely to see her hometown. I didn't know she had so many friends, but those friends have a voice, and that voice was ignited after the November election, and I think we need to see that voice ignited in the courts and all throughout our Commonwealth.
There hasn't been a Democratic woman elected to the Commonwealth Court since 1991. I just need for you to hear that. Listen, my background is one of poverty, abuse, chaos, dysfunction. My mother had 3 children at a young age, had no real work experience, no real education, and she was forced to work minimum wage jobs to try to keep my siblings and I with a roof over our head. And she could barely do it. And I had a sister who struggled with severe mental health issues and addiction problems, and I worked very hard to try to keep her alive, and I couldn't. I brought myself up through poverty. I worked my way through community college and state schools, and really tried in my own way to make a difference in my life and to bring myself up and to help be a different role model for my own children. So I have this, I think what would be a very important dual aspect of my personality. I have a good work ethic, I'm determined, I'm thorough, but I also have a lot of empathy and a lot of compassion for what people have struggled, their vulnerabilities, their security, their dignity. So I'm going to bring a nice balance to the court. on these issues.
Thank you.
Judge Cosgrove, if we could start with you this time. What is your history mentoring minorities and women?
I have worked in the civil rights field for my entire career. As far as the specifics of that, I've litigated cases that have protected rights of women, that have protected rights of minorities. One of my most proud moments was in election court in 2008 when a woman from Venezuela had just become a citizen of the United States, but not in time to register to vote. But she was entitled to vote because she was an American citizen. It was 2008. I knew who she was going to vote for. And at 5:25, we litigated the matter, and within 2 hours, we got her a ballot, and she voted for the first time. But she was going to be denied, and I think her race, her background, the fact that she was from Latin America was not going to help her. And I hired the first African-American law clerk when I was a judge on Luzerne County, first one since 1850. I thought it was time.
Well, in my professional career, I have really strived to protect the rights of all workers, including minorities. I've filed class actions on behalf of 4,000 state employees. I've filed an action on behalf of a woman who was trying to get benefits for her same-sex partner, and this was before marriage equality. So I've been very active on my law practice in protecting the rights of minorities. On an individual basis, I have volunteered for Junior Achievement of Northeastern Pennsylvania, where we go into the public schools and we teach public school students about the business in general. I've taught Sunday school at my local church, where every Sunday we have the kids come in, and we have adult classes too. So we've reached out to all different groups in that respect. So not only have I strived on a professional basis to protect the rights of all individuals, but in my outside of my professional career, I've been active in my community, not only through Junior Achievement in Northeastern Pennsylvania, where we reach out to all students of every ethnicity and religious group, but I've also been involved in my local church, where we're reaching out to the students in trying to further their involvement in the community.
As a judge for the last 10 years, I've been very active in mentoring young female attorneys and working with them. But for me, what is one of the most important projects for me is to mentor young women at risk. Because of what I went through, I think that I have a lot to offer, a lot to, I came from a situation that they came from, and I think that I have a good story to say, what it takes to get out of it. And that's one of the areas that I want to be most active in if I can become a Commonwealth Court judge. It's very hard to be doing extracurricular activities when you're a trial judge. You have to give your first and foremost attention to your juries. You can't leave. But I do get involved in ambassadorship programs. We go out to the schools. But what's been happening is folks have been coming to me and sending me young women that they think have promise, they're interested in the law, and I mentor them in a very informal way through feeder schools, and they come to my courtroom and they sit on the bench, and I've gotten to know them, and we work hard towards getting them a better future. But that's what I want to do, if I have a little more flexibility.
Thank you very much. And at this point, we're going to hear a word from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
From Both Sides is a production of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy and is made possible by the support of the Pennsylvania Center for Women in Politics at Chatham University, a nonpartisan center devoted to fostering women's public leadership through education, empowerment, and action. The first to focus on women's political involvement in Pennsylvania, the center integrates disciplinary knowledge, civic education, and capacity building, while examining the intersection of women and public policy. From Both Sides is also sponsored by the Winter Group, a full-service government relations firm based in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We guide clients through the challenging seasons of public affairs with experience and capability second to none. Visit us at www.wintergrouppa.com. From Both Sides is also supported as a public service by Saul Ewing LLP, a law firm with a 100-year tradition of serving the needs of business, government, education, healthcare, technology, and manufacturing in our region. and by the University Center for International Studies, the engine for extending the global reach of the University of Pittsburgh and its students. From Both Sides is also sponsored by Dr. Wendell Funk, one of Central Pennsylvania's most experienced cosmetic plastic surgeons. Dr. Funk is a leader in new and innovative non-invasive procedures like cool sculpting. His long-term experience with all types of cosmetic surgery, as well as facial injectables, keeps new and repeat patients returning to his practice in Lancaster, York, and Camp Hill. From Both Sides is also sponsored by the Ed and Jeannie Arnold Foundation.
Welcome back to From Both Sides. We're here with the Pennsylvania Federation of Democratic Women, the Grantville Holiday Inn, and our second judicial forum with the Commonwealth Court judge candidates. I'm going to start with the next question, and let's see, we'll start with Judge Cosgrove since the mic is with you. If we asked your spouse or your family about your character, what kind of person you are, what would your response be?
Well, you can ask my wife many things, and she'll have many answers, but I think that most importantly, she's my best friend, and our relationship is such that we share everything. We share our lives. We share all our values. I think she would tell you that I may be infuriatingly principled, and she has told me that, and I'm honored by that. And ultimately, she knows that I just simply will not bend from what is right, no matter the consequences, no matter the difficulties. That is what I've done in our personal lives. That's what I've done as a common pleas judge. That's what I've done as a Commonwealth Court judge. I was appointed by Governor Rendell to replace the main culprit judge in the so-called Kids for Cash scandal. I was appointed with the directive, bring integrity back to the judiciary. That meant a lot to me. And a Senate that was controlled by another party confirmed me unanimously. I think that says what you ask.
Well, I think if you speak to my wife, she would probably tell you in terms of my work that when I start working on a case, I tend to just hone in on that case, because really when somebody comes to you as an attorney, it's never with good news. It's always with something bad. So I always feel that it's my obligation to really work as hard as I can and to make such a difference in that person's lives. And sometimes I may tend to stay in the office too late because I'm too focused on that case. So she might fault me for working too many hours, but I think it's always important when somebody comes to you with their problems that you really put in the time that they deserve for them. On the home front, she would also probably fault me for being too honest and for not being too nice and forgiving to everybody that I deal with on a regular basis. I like to have faith in people, and that maybe that's a fault that she would have me.
Well, ladies, I am the heart and the hearth of my family. I don't care how far we've come in women's lives and women's rights, I still have all the obligations to keep my household and my children together with a full-time job. So I am the cook, I'm the cleaner, I'm the laundress, I'm the holiday person, I am the heart of my family. I run a tight ship. I'm very organized. I'm there whenever they need me to be. My ex-husband is running my campaign. Well, so if that says anything, we're very good friends, and he's been remarried, and we have one big, happy, modern family at this point. But I am, as the woman and the mother, I run the house, and I love to cook, and I love everything to be very cozy and warm, and I like the holidays to be planned, and I like tradition, and I like the kids to know every year that certain things are going to happen in a certain way, and I love my family. I love taking care of them.
Thank you. Mr. Egan, what one case has made the biggest impact on your thinking about the law, and why?
Well, it was probably one of the early cases that I had when I was a young attorney. I graduated from the Dickinson School of Law in 1996, and then I went on to clerk for a federal judge in Scranton, Judge Nealon. He was appointed by John F. Kennedy, and that was a great experience. But right after that, I took on a case where a woman came to me. She was a nurse, and she was terminated when she went on maternity leave. And worked really hard on that case, took it to a jury, ended up getting her a jury verdict in her favor, got her job back, got her the benefits that she really had earned and were taken away simply because she went on maternity leave. I later found out, the federal judge that was involved in that case told me that that was the very first jury verdict on behalf of an individual in the Middle District of Pennsylvania, so I was very proud of that case. But what it taught me was that, and I alluded to this earlier, when somebody comes to you as an attorney, it's never with good news, it's with a problem. And I learned very early on as an attorney that I could make a big change in somebody's lives, and that had a big effect on me.
Every case that we deal with, whether it's as an attorney or as a judge, every case means the world to the person in front of us. So I've always tried to keep that in mind, and I've always tried to be mindful of the fact that no matter what else is going on, this person as a judge, if I'm sitting at the bench, that person wants a fair and impartial resolution. As a judge, I presided over a number of cases at a common pleas level, from first-degree murder, from medical malpractice. One case that I dealt with had to do with a woman who lost her child shortly after birth, and there was a medical malpractice case. And there was a real important issue with regard to discovery. And I wrote an opinion that's been cited, that's been used, and it was an important decision. And I'm glad that I had the chance to be a part of that. But I look at the judiciary in all its aspects. This past month, we've seen judges, federal judges, who have issued orders that have been designed to protect our rights and our liberties, and we have a president of the United States that has denigrated them and called them so-called judges. So I think it's important that we remember all cases matter, all judges matter, and that we need to act accordingly to maintain the integrity of our discipline and our branch of government.
Gosh, I have a 30-year career in law, so as an attorney and a litigator, so it's very hard to narrow it down. But I can tell you, as a prosecutor, I was particularly worried about, I specialize in domestic violence crimes, and I had a lot of worries about women who wouldn't testify, who changed their mind, and I worried about whether they would be killed or not, and some of the cases were particularly distressing to me. I also did some defense work afterwards, and I had one case in particular where the gentleman was charged with a home invasion, and I knew he was innocent. He can't get into too many details, but I knew he was innocent. You could see how the forces of a criminal justice system can work against somebody. It's very scary. It's actually very scary. He was ended up being found not guilty. But look, as a trial judge for the last 10 years in civil and criminal, every case is important to the litigant. Every case is important, whether you're accused of a crime or the victim of a crime or you're a plaintiff or a defendant. That day in court for you and that week in your trial, that is a profound impact. So for me, I treat every case with great respect, and I give it all that I can. So people walk away feeling they had a fair shot.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What is your biggest weakness, and what will you do to compensate for that?
Me? I'm very impatient. All right, I don't like to waste people's time, and so I am neurotically early, and I try to get people to come into court earlier than even we're allowed. And I try to move things along very quickly because I don't like to waste people's times. But I think that my biggest weakness is that I'm just so worried about getting everything done, because we have huge caseloads that sometimes I can maybe be a little too impatient.
Well, I can't cook, so I'm going to Ellen's house, and she's inviting us over for dinner. But that's one weakness. The other, I would say that I can overextend myself. I can be involved in too many things. Running a campaign and also being a full-time judge, well, there's very little time left, and yet I'm taking that time to do other things and be involved in certain projects and projects at our church and projects elsewhere. And I'm trying to say, well, just give me 50 more days, folks, and then the primary will be over, and hopefully I'll still be a candidate, and give me until November. But no, I can't say no. And so I'm extending myself, so some days when we have a day where I'm not traveling, not driving around, I really appreciate that. But that'll go on. Whether I'm a candidate, whether I'm a judge, no matter what I'm doing, I'm going to overextend myself, and it just doesn't stop.
Well, let me first say I'm the cook in the family at my house, so you guys can come. You guys can come over to my house for dinner. But and that goes to probably my biggest fault. I'm too accommodating. I always want to, when I welcome people into my house or I deal with clients, I'm too accommodating, and I always want to help people. But as a judge, I think sometimes you have to be a little sterner than that, and I recognize that. As a judge, you have to take the personalities out of the case. You can't let the lawyers run the show, because the job or the role as a judge is to make sure that the facts get before the court in the best manner they can, and that you apply those laws to the facts. And in doing so, you really have to take the personalities out of that. If you have a more aggressive attorney, you need to make sure that both sides of the case are coming in, and on an appellate court level, make sure that all the facts before the lower court or the administrative agency come into the case. So in my personal life, I'm accommodating. For clients, I'm always accommodating, because I'm trying to help them also. But as a judge, I know that even though we're there to work for the citizens of Pennsylvania, our job is to make sure that we take the personalities out of a case, take the lawyers out of the case, and make sure that the client's cases get heard and the law gets applied to the facts.
Okay, thank you. Final question, Diane?
Yes, and we're very short on time, so very quickly, if you could, Mr. Egan, yes. If elected at the end of your 10-year term, how will you measure success?
Well, I think if everybody, the Pennsylvania Constitution also has a due process provision, just like the federal Constitution. So at the end of 10 years, if I look back and say that everybody before me received due process that they're entitled to, I'll feel that I did a good job as a judge.
Okay, thank you.
I've been on the court now since July, and it is the greatest honor professionally that I could ever imagine. And I know that at the end of this time, if I had to leave the bench today, I know I'd be able to say that everyone was treated fairly, everyone got a fair shot, everyone got more time from me than I could imagine ever giving, and I'm thrilled to have been there. And I know at the end of 10 years, I'll continue, if I have the chance, I'll continue to serve in that way.
Thank you for this forum, by the way. Thank you for being here. I'm nearing the end of 10 years on the bench, and I have a reputation for integrity, independence, thoroughness, preparedness, and respect. At the end of 10 years, what I want is for people to have walked away and said, she gave us a fair shot. Thank you so much.
Thank you. How about if we all give them a round of applause for their... And I'd like to take this opportunity. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining us here with the Pennsylvania Federation of Democratic Women, and from both sides. And for our viewers, I want to remind you that the most important thing you can take away from today's show is the importance of your vote on primary election day, May the 16th. And remember, as women in Pennsylvania, there's much more that unites us than divides us. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.